Welcome to the MMA Junkie Rankings Report for Wednesday, July 1st. My name is John Morgan, ranking chair. Gorgeous George Garcia with me as always. And of course, it was UFC on ESPN 12 that was the center of the attention this past week. George, fun card top to bottom, man. A lot of fun results, a lot of fun fights. But at the end of the day, we're really talking about one huge fight in the lightweight division that kind of shook things up. So talk to me about what you saw in this card.
Yeah. So look, Dustin Poirier and Dan Hooker put one on for the ages. You know, Hooker was leading the fight early on, and then Poirier came back and he won those important rounds. And so then when you unpack this fight, you're like, okay, what are we going to do with Dan Hooker? I see no shame in his performance, obviously. And the guys that are behind him in our rankings are Donald Cerrone, Ali Aquinta, and Kevin Lee. Now, those are three fighters who are deserving of being in the rankings, but they just haven't presented a resume like Dan Hooker, where he's won those consecutive fights that led him to the Dustin Poirier fight, where again he competed. So we're going to leave him at 7. And with Dustin Poirier, it gets a little bit more complicated because ahead of him is Tony Ferguson at 3, Justin Gaethje at 2, Khabib Nurmagomedov at 1. Nurmagomedov's the guy that gave him his recent loss. In the past 3 years, Dustin Poirier's been brilliant. He won an interim belt, just like the two guys ahead of him. But head-to-head, man, there's no replacement for when you're arguing with somebody, hey, who's better, A or B? And you go back and forth. You can present the stats. You can present the records. You present wherever you want. But when one guy can go, but my guy be your guy. You know what I mean? That goes a long way. And Poirier's fight isn't that far removed. Now, look, Justin Gaethje's done some great things since then. He's won 4 in a row. He is deserving of fighting Khabib Nurmagomedov, interim versus undisputed. I'm not going to take that away from him. But when you're talking about the resumes and what they've done, I think Dustin Poirier has to go from number 4 to number 2, pushing back Gaethje and Ferguson. It's not always going to be representative of, hey, who's fighting in the title shot, 1 versus 2. I mean, ideally you'd love that, but that doesn't always happen. So in the lightweight division, that's what we're doing. Poirier's going to 2, and Gaethje and Ferguson will have to slide back.
Yeah, I think that's the right move there. You said it, the head-to-head speaks for itself. And then it got really interesting discussion we need to have around that, because that has some impact on the pound-for-pound rankings as well. So we kind of played that one out a little bit. I mean, there's some solid names in there. And ultimately, what did you decide to do there at pound-for-pound?
Yeah, and so this is one where I was telling the editors, I was like, hey, look, this is the best I can do, but you guys are going to have to assist in this one. So like John was saying, it's almost like we wish we would have taped the conversation just before this, as we figured this thing out. But we're gonna do something different here. In the pound for pound division, you don't get these big moves like you do in some in the respective divisions. Pound for pound is the elite. That's where we're splitting atoms, trying to figure out, well, what's what, because they all have resumes that are impressive. Most of them are wearing belts in our pound for pound, or they're coming off of wearing a belt. And to get to a belt, you have to have performance, streaks, records, everything. So what happens with Poirier? He's coming out of the honorable mentions. He's going all the way to number 10, just ahead of Justin Gaethje, to reflect that that head-to-head, and ahead of number 11, who's Max Holloway. Again, a guy who defended the title 3 times, but he lost his title, and so now he's down, in the, we'll say in the teens, but from 10 to 15, that area. So that'll reflect those 2 pound-for-pound wins for Dustin Poirier. And here's a move that doesn't happen too often. It's usually slow in and slow out, like I mentioned. It happens on the reverse side as well. Tony Ferguson is going to go from 12 to honorable mention because, look, Robert Whittaker, Paulo Costa, Dominic Reyes. I mean, in Whittaker's case, he was an undisputed champion. And then the other 2 guys, Paulo Costa's undefeated. He deserves his shot at Israel Adesanya. Can't wait for that one. And then Dominic Reyes challenged the number 1 pound-for-pound guy for 5 rounds. He came up a bit short, but he's got a respectable record, and he proved he belongs there. So Ferguson down to honorable mention. And again, Poirier up to number 10 with everyone else sliding down up until 13, 14, 15, they stay the same.
Yeah, and no disrespect to Tony Ferguson, man. As you know, we're all big fans of El Cucuy, but like you said, at that pound-for-pound level, man, you're talking about splitting atoms, man. You're talking about very, very little, so nothing wrong with being honorable mention right there. And as we see with what Dustin Poirier just did, you get a big win, you might be able to make some moves because that lightweight division is so competitive with those stars at the top. So, listen, a little bit of a slow week with the holiday. We get a little breather from all this MMA that we've been going through, but then we move on to Fight Island, and we're going to see some huge swings in those 4 cards because there's some big names that have been sitting on the shelf for a few months. We'll talk about the way it impacts it all on the Rankings Report.